Hey guys, tonight we step into velvet halls soaked with secrets, silk sheets laced with poison, and chamber walls that know far too much. You're not a princess, not even close. You're the maid, the invisible girl in the corner with cracked hands and too many tasks. Welcome to the court of Anne Boleyn. Your first day smells like boiled cabbage, hot wax, and fear. The kitchens clatter, the floors are already slippery, and someone's shouting about a goose that escaped. You're barely 15, plucked from your family's modest home to serve in the most volatile household in Tudor England. Congratulations, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and the time in the comments. I want to know where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your shoes are too tight. The hem of your borrowed dress scratches your ankles. You've just curtsied before Lady Anne Boleyn, and now your spine feels permanently bent. Her eyes? Sharp. Not cruel, but alert. She clocks your clumsiness in a blink and moves on. Thank God. The maids murmur about her, how she smells like lemon balm and ambition, how her laugh can charm a duke or slice through glass. You'll learn quickly that loyalty here is currency, and gossip is blood sport. Your first duty? Polishing the silver bowl for Anne's pet monkey's figs. Yes, a monkey. It stares at you like it knows your future ends badly. Your hands tremble. The bowl slips. You catch it, but not before fig juice splashes your apron. Already, you're marked. At night, you share a straw mattress with two older maids. One snores. One talks in her sleep. You don't sleep. Not really. You listen to the creaks in the beams, the distant laughter from the great hall, and wonder how many girls before you were crushed by this place. Probably all of them. On your third day, you're tasked with brushing Anne's hair. It's glossy, dark, and smells like rosemary oil. She doesn't speak to you, but she hums. A French tune. You recognize none of it, but her rhythm is steady, calculated. A melody for war. You learn the rules quickly. Don't turn your back to her. Don't let the candle wax drip on her books. And for the love of Saint Peter, do not ever interrupt her chess games. The Boleyn household runs like a duck on water, graceful above, frantic paddling beneath. Maids like you make that possible. You fetch, you mend, you bow, and you never ask questions. Not out loud, but you hear them. The quiet ones. Like why Anne sometimes stares at the fire for hours, or why the royal messenger always leaves with his cloak drenched in sweat. Or how she can laugh so brightly, then drop into a silence so thick it chokes the whole room. One morning, you trip over a boy, one of the kitchen lads, lying unconscious in the hallway. Blood trickles from his temple. No one explains. By supper, he's gone. His name is never mentioned again. You write your own name in the dust behind the wardrobe, just to prove you're real, that you're still here. And then there's the dress incident. Anne receives a new gown, deep crimson velvet, gold thread, imported buttons. You're asked to bring it from the seamstress's chest. On your way, your foot catches on an uneven flagstone. You go down. So does the dress. Into soot. You expect a beating, or worse, dismissal. But instead, Anne stares at you for a long moment, then says, "At least you didn't rip it." Her voice is flat. Then she turns away. That's when you realize mercy isn't kindness. It's calculation. She's keeping score. You spend the rest of the week trying to stay invisible. Hard to do when the page boys keep flinging apple cores at your back and calling you soot skirt. The court is a performance, and everyone's an actor terrified of forgetting their lines, even the Queen. One evening, you catch her staring into a mirror, not adjusting her hair or smoothing her gown. Just staring, like she's looking through herself. Her reflection looks tired, human. It vanishes the moment she sees you in the background. You find a scrap of parchment in her study, discarded behind a tapestry. Just one line, "I am more shadow than flame." You keep it, fold it, hide it under your mattress like a relic. Historians still argue whether Anne truly felt hunted, even during her rise, or whether it was all part of her cunning ascent. You were there. You saw the way her hands shook sometimes when she thought no one noticed. By month's end, you've learned how to scrub a chamber pot without gagging, how to bow deep enough to avoid eye contact, and how to sneak leftover sweetmeats when no one's watching. You've also learned how to recognize when the air shifts, when a room suddenly silences itself before Anne enters. One rainy morning, Anne walks past the linen room and pauses. "You," she says. Your stomach flips. You point to yourself. She nods. "Bring my writing kit." You fetch the leather case, hands shaking, and place it gently on her lap. She gives you a glance, not warmth, not coldness, just interest. "What's your name?" she asks. You tell her. She repeats it once, then never says it again. Still, it's more than most get. That night, as thunder rolls across the Thames, you lie awake and whisper your name to yourself, over and over, like a prayer, as if saying it can anchor you, as if knowing who you are will be enough to survive the snake pit you now call home. The days fall into rhythm, if you can call it that. Every morning, the castle coughs itself awake in gusts of chimney smoke and the shriek of turning iron latches. You're up before the crows, stuffing your feet into damp shoes and tying your apron by candlelight. You dream of sleeping until sunrise, but dreams are for nobles and fools. Your first task? Empty the chamber pots. You carry them carefully, arms shaking under the weight and stench. Once, a boy dropped one in the hallway. No one ever saw him again. Rumor says he was sent to a monastery. You suspect the river. Then comes scrubbing the hall tiles. You do it on your knees, cloth in hand, trying not to think about the fact that your back will never quite straighten again. Sometimes the court dogs stroll past and pee right where you've just polished. One of them, a mop-haired creature named Marmaduke, growls at you every time. You growl back, quietly, when no one's watching. By mid-morning, the castle roars to life. Pages run past shouting. Perfumes cloud the air like war fog, and cooks begin slamming metal pans as if summoning Thor. You hurry to the kitchens, where it's all heat and chaos. You're sent to slice pigeon pie, one of the many culinary curiosities of the time. The pie smells decent, but what lies inside is questionable. Tiny bones, grease, maybe a feather or two. You serve it with a curtsy and a neutral face, but you've learned, never eat the pigeon pie. Not unless you want to visit the chamber pot again. Which, ironically, you will, just to clean it. Still, the pie is a favorite of Anne's brother George. You often see him swaggering down the halls, cracking jokes too clever for his own good. He once winked at you. You pretended not to see. Whispers swirl in the laundry room. George and Anne are too close. You frown. Surely not. But then, this is a court where truth wears more masks than a masquerade in Venice. The older maids gossip while folding linen. "Did you hear?" one says. "A Spanish ambassador found a frog in his stew." Another claims Anne has books she reads in secret, banned ones. A third swears she saw Henry kiss a lady-in-waiting behind the tapestries. You don't know what to believe. But you listen to everything. It's safer that way. Historians still argue whether the gossip spread through Tudor households like this was mostly truth or venom. You decide it doesn't matter. Gossip shapes power. Belief is more dangerous than fact. Your favorite chore, oddly, is gathering herbs. The head cook sends you to the gardens to clip rosemary, sage, sometimes even mint. The air out there feels real, untouched by perfume or politics. The leaves snap under your fingers. It's the one place you don't have to whisper. One foggy afternoon, you stumble across a half-rotten sack hidden beneath the hedges. Inside, what looks like a dead chicken, covered in wax seals and black ribbon. Some sort of charm, or curse maybe. You don't touch it. You don't even breathe. You just back away, eyes wide. Later that night, you hear Anne scream during her prayers. Coincidence? Maybe. But now, you carry a sprig of rosemary in your pocket, just in case. Life in the household is never quiet. If it's not shouting, it's music. Lutes, flutes, someone attempting to sing in Italian. You've begun tuning it out, until one evening, you hear something different. A low hum. Male voices, followed by a sharp cry. You peek around a corner and see two courtiers dragging a servant by his collar. He's bloodied, but conscious. The men sneer, spit something in French, and leave him in the mud. You help him up. He doesn't thank you. Just stares, dead-eyed, and limps away. You never see him again. Your appetite starts to fade. Not from the food, though eel jelly is certainly a crime against nature, but from the constant dread. You eat bread slowly. Drink small sips of wine, always wondering if someone's watching, or worse, counting. There's a banquet one night, all velvet and harp strings. You're stationed behind the dais, ready to refill goblets. The scent of roast peacock floats through the air, stuffed with cloves and staring at you with its beady eyes like some awkward ghost. Anne enters late. Her dress is emerald. Her necklace, your favorite, features a gold bead dangling above her collarbone like a warning. Her face is unreadable, but her eyes scan the hall like twin swords. The king grins at her. You hold your breath. She nods once. No smile. They sit. By dessert, the air is thick with tension. You can hear every scrape of a spoon. One noble laughs too hard and snorts wine. No one else laughs. The room swallows it whole. Anne asks for quince paste. You fetch it from the pantry, past the cellar where barrels breathe in the cold. You trip on the way back, just a little, but catch yourself. The paste lands sideways on the plate. When you place it in front of her, her eyes flicker down, then up. That's it. But you sweat through your shift for hours after. You talk to yourself more these days. In your head, mostly. Narrating your movements like you're the star of some tragic play. She lifts the tray with grace. She does not weep when the Lord Chancellor steps on her foot. You learn to be invisible and indispensable. An object with legs and hands and ears but no opinions. And somehow, strangely, you begin to adapt. You find joy in strange places. A new comb. A stolen minute of silence behind the curtain. A joke whispered between servants about how the court tailor keeps fainting every time Anne changes her hemline plans. You even laugh. Once, and it feels like stealing. Still, you never forget where you are, who you serve, or what happens to those who get too close to the fire. Anne's household is not a home. It's a performance that never ends. And the applause. You learn to read Anne's moods like weather, fast changes, unexpected storms. When she's in high spirits, the whole castle breathes easier. You hum while folding linen. Even Marmaduke the dog lets you pass without a snarl. But when Anne is cross, the floorboards groan louder, and every eye darts to the exits. Today is one of those days. It starts with a slammed door. You're in the corner, refolding napkins you just folded, because apparently too crisp is a thing, when she strides into the solar, velvet skirts slicing the air. She's late to meet the king. Again. You don't know what caused the delay, but you do know that 2 ladies-in-waiting are missing from their usual posts, and the air smells faintly of scorched parchment. Anne hisses something in French, something nasty, you assume, given the way the courtiers shrink. Then she fixes her hair, lifts her chin, and stalks out like a queen born of dragons. You exhale. Anne Boleyn is not beautiful in the soft, saint-like way some prefer. She's all angles and fire. A long nose, dark clever eyes, and a mouth that curves like it's already plotting. You've heard whispers she trained in the French court, learned their games and perfumes. That she once danced so well the King of France spilled his wine trying to keep up. One of the maids swears Anne keeps a love charm hidden in her bodice, a token soaked in the king's sweat. You grimace. Too vivid. Another claims Anne has a 6th finger, hidden beneath a pearl glove. You look for it during dressing but never see one. Still, she avoids showing her hands too much. Could be vanity. Could be legend. Historians still argue whether Anne truly bore any deformities, or if that tale was cooked up post-execution to stain her memory. Either way, it doesn't matter. The court believes what it wants. You carry a tray of cherries into her chamber. She's pacing. Her hair's half done. Her hands twist in front of her. "Leave it," she says without looking. You curtsy and turn, but before you can reach the door, she asks, "What would you do if you were queen for a day?" You freeze. That wasn't supposed to happen. "I'd sleep in," you blurt, then curse yourself silently. She laughs, a genuine laugh, not one of her polite razor-edged chuckles. Wise girl. Then, silence. You nod, flee, and replay the moment a dozen times while peeling onions an hour later. You weren't supposed to be noticed. And yet, that week, she's volatile. One moment she gifts a lady a gold comb. The next, she throws a goblet at the fireplace. It shatters. Everyone pretends it didn't happen. In private, you see her most unguarded. She sits by the window some nights, watching the clouds. You light her candles. She thanks you, almost absently, and goes on staring. Once, you think you hear her whisper her own name. You're not meant to listen, but you do. She's obsessed with scent. You prepare her perfumes, rose, musk, and a curious one that smells like scorched wood and wild violets. She wears it when she's most anxious. Before court visits. Before confronting the king. Before chess. Ah yes, the chess. Anne doesn't just play chess. She lives it. She makes you set up the board precisely, black queen always facing the south window. If you get it wrong, she stares at it until you fix it, without a word. Her matches with the king are infamous. Sometimes they last hours, sometimes they end with Henry storming out and Anne smugly sipping wine. You once saw her knight a pawn using her fingernail. "Even the smallest piece," she murmured, "can topple kings." You memorized that line. Court gossip claims she sends secret messages through her chess plays. One knight here, one bishop there, coded positions only select courtiers can decipher. Whether it's true or not, you don't know. But the pieces do seem oddly arranged when certain visitors arrive. A week later, Anne nearly bites off a steward's head for delivering the wrong prayer book. "I said the green one," she snaps, then turns to you. People listen less and less. Do you listen? You nod, eyes wide. "Always, Your Grace." Good. That's how you learn who means to harm you. And just like that, your heart tap dances through your ribs. She rewards loyalty. That's another rule. You fetch her a certain pen she favors, carved, slightly cracked near the base, and she smiles. Actually smiles. You glow for the next 2 days, but when her moods dip, the shadows in her eyes deepen. She rages against the chessboard, snapping a pawn in half with one sharp twist. The next day she apologizes to it. The pawn, not the person who carved it. Just the pawn. One of the older chambermaids leans in as you scrub flagstones. Mark my words, child, that woman's head won't age with her. You shudder. Not because of the omen, but because deep down, part of you believes it. You're assigned to burn her old gloves. Some smell of jasmine, others of sweat. One pair has bloodstains. You don't ask. You never ask. Her clothes are poetry, deep emerald silks, black velvet with golden thread, delicate white hoods lined with silver braid. You help her dress sometimes. The layers weigh more than you do. She never flinches under them. She wears them like armor. She tells a lady-in-waiting, if they want me to be a queen, I'll be the sharpest they've ever seen. The lady nods, but looks mildly terrified. One evening, while brushing her hair, she says, "Did you know peacocks eat snakes?" You shake your head. Isn't that delightful? You don't know how to respond. You just keep brushing. The monkey, by the way, has developed a hatred for your broom. He attacks it on sight. You now use a feather duster with shaking hands. You've started talking in your sleep. Other maids tell you. They say you mutter Anne's name and phrases in French you've never learned. You laugh it off, but at night, you whisper her prayers back to yourself. Just in case she hears them. Just in case the walls do. You weren't trying to eavesdrop. Honestly, you were just trying to find the brush Anne tossed behind the screen during one of her "I don't want to be perceived" moods. The chamber was quiet, save for the usual creaks of old timber and the occasional scratch from something in the walls. You crouched low, hand outstretched under the edge of the dresser, when her voice startled you upright. "You shouldn't have come," she says, low and brittle. A man answers, calm, polished, his voice like cooled wine. "And yet, here I am." You freeze. You know that voice. Everyone does. Sir Thomas Wyatt, court poet, rumored lover, walking danger. There's a pause. You hear fabric rustle, like someone shifting closer. Anne speaks again. "It's not safe. They already watch me with knives for eyes. I can't afford poetry right now." "Poetry?" He sighs. "When were we ever safe? I remember the garden in Calais. You wore yellow. I told you then." "Don't," she snaps. Then softer, "Don't." Your fingers tighten around the edge of the table. You're not breathing. Not really. Just hanging there, suspended in the tension. "I still dream of you," he says. "Not your crown, just you." Anne doesn't answer. Footsteps. A swish of skirts. Then silence. You back away as quietly as you can, but you know the sound of your heartbeat is practically announcing your position. You slip out into the corridor, hands cold, palms damp, stomach churning. You don't tell anyone what you heard, not just because it could cost you your head, but because you don't even understand it. What was it? A love affair? A threat? A memory? Historians still argue whether Anne and Wyatt truly had a romantic history, or whether his poems merely made it easy to believe so. But you were there. You felt it in the room. That humming string stretched tight between two people who should have let go but hadn't. A week later, Wyatt is summoned for questioning. He returns pale, lips bloodless. He doesn't make eye contact with anyone. Anne doesn't mention his name once. That tells you everything. You begin to notice more. The way Anne flinches at certain messengers, how her letters vanish without record. how she wears her French necklace when the king is angry, some kind of private armor. One night, you sneak into the lower hall to fetch clean towels and overhear 2 guards whispering. They've got eyes on her. Cromwell's orders. About time. Her wings are too wide. You hurry away before they spot you. That phrase sticks with you. Her wings are too wide. Like she's some wild hawk no one dared cage until now. Anne still plays the role, of course. Publicly, she smiles, laughs, even flirts in the sharp, tactical way she does. But you see the way she watches shadows now, and the way she presses her hand to her belly, empty again. You were there the night she lost her child. The king hadn't even returned from the hunt. Just you, 2 midwives, and a blood-stained bed. No crying infant, just silence. Heavy. Absolute. She didn't weep. She didn't scream. She just stared at the wall and whispered, "He'll blame me." You cleaned the linens. The coppery scent clung to your hands for days. You scrubbed them raw, but it stayed. It always does. After that, things shift. The king visits less. When he does, he's distracted, tapping his fingers and speaking of jousts and ships. Anne clutches at smiles like they're slipping fish. She hosts more elaborate feasts, wears brighter colors, brings in a troupe of actors once just to make him laugh. He barely chuckled. You're called to her chamber one afternoon. She's staring out the window. The chessboard beside her remains unfinished, a bishop tipped sideways. "Have you ever been kissed?" she asks, eyes still on the sky. Your ears burn. "No, Your Grace." "Good," she says. "Don't. It changes everything." You leave more confused than ever. She used to be fire and ambition. Now, there's smoke curling at the edges. But one night, something happens. You're fetching a robe when you notice Anne's desk drawer ajar. Inside, a small mirror. Not just any mirror, a Venetian one, etched in silver and mother of pearl. She always locks it away. You see yourself in the reflection, and something strange. For just a moment behind you, a man in the corner. But when you turn, the room is empty. You check again. Nothing. Later, you learn that mirror was said to be cursed. A gift from a noblewoman whose entire family perished in a fire the month after. Anne keeps it because, according to legend, it reveals your enemies. You never look into it again. And still, despite everything, there are quiet moments. She sits by the hearth, humming lullabies in a language you don't recognize. You sew buttons onto her sleeve while she speaks of Rome, of stars, of women who ruled cities with honey and blood. You almost forget what looms overhead, but the household is tense. Servants are replaced overnight. A chamberlain disappears mid-shift. Even the monkey is gone. Gifted, they say. You doubt it. You cling to what you know. The scalding water of the laundry basins, the hiss of candle wicks, the rhythm of the palace breathing around you. Then one afternoon, Anne calls you by name. Not girl, not you there. Your actual name. "I trust you," she says, and you feel a crack in your chest. Because trust here? That's more terrifying than fear. There's a scent in the air you can't name. Spiced wine, oil, and something that smells vaguely like thunder. It's coronation day. Anne's, yours too, in a twisted way. You're still a maid, still unpaid, still blistered, but now your royal household blistered. The castle quivers with preparation. You've been up since before the rooster bothered to crow, stuffing pew cushions, chasing runaway caps, and making sure no one drinks the king's wine before the actual king arrives. The courtiers are already drunk on spectacle. Everyone's hair is higher, their sleeves puffier, their lies sweeter. You're handed a new dress, blue. Not faded, not borrowed, new. It doesn't quite fit. and it itches in places you're too polite to scratch, but you beam like you own it. You almost forget your fingernails are black with soot. Almost. The procession begins. Anne rides beneath a canopy, wearing a gown that could feed 5 villages for a year. Gold embroidery snakes up the sleeves. Pearls cling to her hood like they're scared to fall. You follow on foot with the other maids, a step behind nobility and 3 steps behind meaning anything. The crowd isn't friendly. Some cheer. Many don't. A few shout things you pretend not to hear. Whore. Usurper. Witch. You grip your skirt and keep moving. One tomato hits the carriage. Not her, but close. Her smile never cracks. Inside the abbey, the air is thick with incense and politics. Latin chants echo. Trumpets blare. You can't see much, but you hear everything. The archbishop, the anointing, the oath, the final prayer that sounds more like a curse. And then, it's done. Anne is queen. Later, in the feasting hall, roasted boars and jeweled pastries parade across groaning tables. Your job is goblet refills and not knocking over the sugared swans. You fail at one, barely, but the swan is caught mid-air by a page with faster hands and more expensive gloves. He winks. You roll your eyes and blush anyway. Anne sits beside Henry, higher than anyone, her crown gleaming so brightly it hurts your teeth to look at. She's smiling. But it's the kind of smile people paint onto puppets, wide, stretched, and unmoving. She beckons a servant. You stumble forward, praying you don't have pigeon fat on your apron. She leans in and whispers, "Fetch the lavender water. I have a headache from too much power." You chuckle, carefully. "Yes, Your Grace." You deliver the lavender yourself. She dabs her temples, then mutters, "Too many eyes. I miss being underestimated." You want to say something, comforting, clever, anything, but words die on your tongue. Instead, you pour her a fresh cup of wine. She lifts it in mock toast to no one. To being crowned and already hunted. There's applause around the room. Not for her toast. Just timing. Historians still debate whether Anne enjoyed her coronation or saw it as the beginning of her end. Some claim she relished every second, basking in stolen glory. Others insist she trembled beneath her veil. You were there. You saw the way her hand shook under the goblet's weight. The next morning, everything is different. New maids, new guards, new rules, and worst of all, new napkin folds. Apparently, your tulip fold is too Flemish. You don't know what that means. You just cry in the pantry for 7 minutes and return with a swan fold that looks like a duck. Anne hosts banquets almost nightly. Not out of joy, but pressure. She needs to prove her worth, her fertility, her charm, and you. You are now part of her display. A well-behaved maid is as essential as the golden candelabras. You're briefed on how to stand, where to place your hands, how to curtsy so low your knees ache, but not so low you look subservient. Court is full of contradictions. You master them all. You now spend half your time dressing Anne, adjusting bodices, pinning sleeves. Once, you poke her with a pin. She doesn't flinch, just says, "Good. Pain reminds me I'm still here." You can't tell if it's a joke. Her scent changes. No longer just violets and rosemary. Now there's musk. Clove. Something sharp underneath. It lingers in your nose hours after she leaves a room. One night, she dances with the king. Their steps are slow, deliberate. You hold your breath watching them. They don't speak. Just move in a rhythm you can't decode. You learn that being queen doesn't mean happiness. It means pressure. It means Anne is too watched to rest, too envied to stumble. There's a gift from Spain, a hand-painted fan. You're ordered to keep it from warping in the damp. Every night you wrap it in cloth, whispering apologies to a fan more valuable than your life. You see less of the old Anne, the one who hummed songs in her chamber. Now she reads more, writes more. You bring her ink and find parchment covered in furious lines and scratched out names. You ask her once, carefully, what she's writing. A prayer, she says, or a warning. I haven't decided. The monkey is gone, the chessboard stays untouched, and every time the wind howls down the hallway, you get a feeling like something's about to snap. And yet, there are moments, small ones. She tucks a lock of hair behind your ear one morning, gives you a book of French phrases so you can flirt without embarrassment, laughs when you stumble over the word for goose. You treasure those moments like stolen coins, not because she's kind, but because she's real, and that might be rarer than kindness. The gossip starts as whispers, harmless, stupid little whispers that flit between servants like moths in candlelight. The king's eyes are wandering again. You ignore it, of course. Gossip is as constant here as damp bread and bad lute music. But then Anne notices, not just the whispers, but where Henry's glances fall. Jane Seymour. You've only seen her a few times, blonde, quiet, always perfectly still, like she's holding her breath. If Anne is fire, Jane is fog, soft, pale, and somehow always in the way without meaning to be. Anne doesn't say anything for days, but you see the way her fingers clench when Jane enters a room, how her smiles freeze into something sharp. One morning, Anne crushes a rose between her fingers until blood wells up. You hand her a cloth. She takes it without a word. Historians still debate when Henry truly fell for Jane, or if he simply grew tired of Anne's stormy skies. But you remember the shift, the way laughter in Anne's chambers turned brittle, how even the courtiers spoke softer, like afraid to wake a beast. The day it happens, you're in the great hall, refilling goblets. A messenger runs in, red-faced, carrying a note. He bows, panting, and hands it to Anne. She reads it. Her face doesn't change, not even a twitch. Then she rises slowly, beautiful, composed, and slaps the king's lute off the table. It cracks against the stone floor. A string breaks with a scream. Everyone freezes. She looks Henry in the eye and says, "Your music is out of tune." Then she turns and walks out. You trail behind, hands shaking. Later, you hear she was summoned to explain herself. You wonder what she said. Probably something poetic. Probably something fatal. Back in her chamber, she throws her shoes across the room. One nearly hits you. She doesn't apologize. Instead, she mutters, "He once begged me to dance for him." Begged. Now he sits with that silence wrapped in lace. You say nothing. You just set the shoes aside. Anne begins to unravel in threads. Not obvious, not all at once, but slowly. Her gowns are looser. Her appetite flickers. Her prayers grow longer. She asks you to braid her hair tighter each day, like it might hold her together. Henry avoids her, not completely, but pointedly. You hear he gifted Jane a jeweled brooch. You hear she returned it, out of modesty. You roll your eyes. Everyone rolls their eyes. Anne throws her fork at dinner, hits a tapestry. No one breathes for a full minute. You're sent to her room that evening to light candles. She's in the corner, sipping wine. Her voice is low. "Tell me the truth. Is she pretty?" You pause. Because if you lie, she'll know. If you tell the truth, she'll feel it. "She's plain," you say, "like milk left out too long." Anne laughs. Genuinely. Good girl. She rewards you with a pin, small, silver, shaped like a falcon. "My crest," she says. Keep it close. You wear it under your shift. Still do, actually. There's a banquet a week later. You expect frost. Instead, Anne arrives in gold silk, wearing a smile sharp enough to shave with. She chats. She compliments. She even kisses Henry's cheek. But her eyes, they never smile. The king announces a tournament. You hate tournaments. They mean more cleaning, more mud, more knights getting concussed in glorious helmeted fashion. You're sent to deliver a message to the stables and nearly get trampled by a horse named Reginald, who hates aprons. Typical. That day, Henry accidentally drops his handkerchief near Jane. She picks it up, smiles demurely. Anne breaks her goblet. The rumors swell like blisters. Some say Henry is preparing to annul the marriage. Others claim Jane is pregnant already. You try not to listen, but it's everywhere. The cooks whisper it over bread dough. The laundresses murmur it while wringing out petticoats. Even Marmaduke the dog seems more smug than usual. Anne tightens her circle. Some ladies are dismissed, others reassigned. You stay, somehow. Maybe because she trusts you, maybe because you're invisible. But you see everything. The king's visits dwindle. Anne writes letters she never sends. You find them tucked into books, stuffed behind cushions. All start with "My dearest lord" and end with ink stains where her hand must have trembled. You once peek at one. It reads, "I would have given you the moon, but you preferred a candle." You don't cry easily, but that one almost gets you. One evening, Anne speaks more than usual. You're brushing her hair, and she asks, "Do you believe in ghosts?" You hesitate. "I'm not sure." She closes her eyes. "I think I might become one." You don't know what to say. Then she adds, "If I haunt anything, it'll be his bed." You almost drop the brush. The court is changing. Jane smiles more. Anne rages less. That's the scariest part, her quiet. You'd take slammed doors and thrown forks over this eerie calm. You find her watching the king and Jane from behind a curtain once. Her face blank, her fingers white from clenching the fabric. "They deserve each other," she whispers. "He a coward, she a shadow." You nod, though you're not sure you agree. But agreement isn't the goal here. Survival is. Anne starts sleeping less. She walks at night, barefoot on cold stone, muttering Latin prayers and half-sentences you can't piece together. You try to stop her once. She brushes past you like wind. You find her in the chapel at dawn. Always kneeling, always silent. Once you sit beside her. Just for a moment. She doesn't speak, but her shoulder rests lightly against yours. That's the closest she's ever come to asking for comfort. The mood across the castle is like a string pulled too tight. Every step you take creaks too loud. Every word feels risky. One night, Anne stands at her window and says, "Do you know how I got him?" You nod. "Do you know how I'll lose him?" You don't answer. She smiles, crooked, bitter. "I already have." The day starts like any other. Too early, too cold, and with a bruise you don't remember earning. You're folding towels when a midwife rushes past you, red-faced and muttering about rose oil and prayers. Your stomach tightens. You know what this means. Anne is pregnant again. You blink hard. This is good news? It should be. It must be. But the tension in the hallways says otherwise. Anne hasn't told anyone. Not officially. But everyone knows. The way she touches her belly. The way the king's visits suddenly increase. Brief, awkward, overly ceremonial. He places a hand on her shoulder, like she's a particularly delicate piece of architecture. You imagine he thinks she'll shatter if he breathes too hard. This time, Anne is cautious. Obsessively so. No dancing, no stress, no loud music, especially not bagpipes. They jangle the soul. she mutters. And certainly no eels. Which, frankly, is a win for everyone. You're part of the small circle allowed in her rooms now. You fetch hot cloths, fluff cushions, and recite from herbal manuals as if the correct sequence of syllables might keep the baby safe. You've never seen her so fragile, or so furious about being fragile. Don't look at me like I'm glass, she snaps one morning when you pause while brushing her hair. I've broken more than I've dropped. She still insists on dressing herself sometimes, even when she clearly shouldn't. You pretend not to notice the way she winces while bending. Every morning she asks, "Do I look stronger today?" You always say yes. You lie well now. Historians still argue whether Anne's final pregnancy was a boy or a girl, whether it ended in miscarriage, stillbirth, or some political cover-up. You only know what you saw and what you cleaned. It's a grey afternoon when the bleeding starts. You're bringing her cinnamon broth when you hear the cry, not of a baby, but of a woman breaking. You drop the bowl. The guards don't stop you as you run. The chamber is chaos. Maids crying. The midwife shouting. The sheets redder than you've ever seen them. Anne, pale, eyes wild, gripping the bedpost, like it's the only thing keeping her in this world. You stand frozen. Until she looks at you. Get him. You don't ask who, you just run. But by the time the king arrives, it's over. He stands at the doorway, nostrils flared, jaw clenched. He doesn't move, doesn't speak, just stares at the bundle in the midwife's arms. Then he leaves. No word, no comfort, just the echo of his boots down the corridor. Anne doesn't cry. You do. She lies motionless for 2 days. You stay by her bed, feeding her spoonfuls of broth, wiping sweat from her brow, whispering anything that might anchor her to the world. The ladies in waiting rotate in and out, all wearing the same expression, half pity, half terror. On the 3rd day, Anne speaks. "Did you know?" she whispers. "They say if you wear red ribbon near your ankles, it keeps the baby safe?" You nod. "I wore white." She laughs, and it sounds like something dying. From then on, she avoids mirrors, curtains stay drawn, perfume bottles remain capped. And yet, she survives. She rises, one breath at a time. Within a week, she's sitting up, brushing her own hair. Within 2, she's walking short distances. Within a month, she's back in court. Thinner, sharper, quieter, but not broken. Pain, she tells you, is just another dress. You learn to wear it. The court responds poorly. Whispers ripple. She's cursed. She's barren. She's done. You start hearing Jane Seymour's name more. And not in whispers anymore. One day, Anne overhears 2 courtiers laughing outside her door. She sends you to summon them. When they enter, she smiles sweetly, then tells them a story about how Cleopatra poisoned herself with a hairpin. They stop laughing. Anne returns to her political game with a vengeance, writing letters, planning events. But it's different now. Like someone who's seen the end of the story and decided to rewrite it, out of spite. You help her plan a feast. She insists on pickled pears, honey-glazed capon, and an almond cake shaped like a Tudor rose. You carry trays, hang garlands, and pretend the whole thing isn't a silent scream for Henry's attention. He attends. Briefly, he compliments the pears, then leaves with Jane. Anne breaks the almond cake with her hands. The rose splits down the middle. That night she doesn't ask you to stay. But you do anyway. Sitting at her feet while she stares at the fire, she speaks softly. "I used to believe I was chosen, like Joan of Arc, destined." You don't interrupt. "Now I wonder if I was just tolerated, until I wasn't." You want to tell her she's wrong, that she's still powerful, still fearsome. But you've learned that even truth can bruise, so you just say, "You're still here." She nods. Then, under her breath, "For now." The next morning she wears red, blood red, not for mourning, for war. And you, faithful, terrified, exhausted, you tighten her corset with trembling hands. Because no matter what comes next, you know the tide has turned. The moment you walk into the room, you can feel it, sharp as vinegar, brittle as old glass. Anne's in one of her moods, the kind where everyone speaks softer, steps lighter, and prays not to become the target of her tongue. She's standing by the window, eyes on the garden, arms folded so tightly they might snap. You begin tidying the hearth, careful not to clank the poker. "I asked for rose water, not orange blossom," she snaps, without turning. You freeze mid-step. The flask in your hand is unmistakably orange blossom. "I'll fetch the right one, Your Grace." She waves her hand. It doesn't matter anymore. He can't tell the difference. He never could. You slink backward, escaping just in time. Her temper has sharpened in recent weeks, but it's not random. It's precise, directed, strategic even. If Anne was fire before, now she's a bonfire cornered in a drafty room, raging just to stay alive. That afternoon, she throws a prayer book across the room. It thuds off the wardrobe and lands near your feet. You pick it up carefully, spine bent, pages slightly torn. You don't return it, you keep it. Because inside, in the margin next to Psalm 55, she's written, "Betrayal always starts with a smile." You remember that line. Anne speaks less now. But when she does, her words are daggers. She scorches musicians who miss notes. She calls out courtiers who flub their bows. She once reduced an ambassador to tears by casually mispronouncing his name and then pretending she hadn't. Everyone's on edge. You included. She lashes out at a maid for delivering the wrong comb. A comb. You've seen her walk barefoot across a splintered floor, but this comb sends her into a tirade about incompetence and saboteurs. You stay out of sight for the rest of the day. That night, in the servant quarters, the talk is vicious. She's gone mad. Cursed. Desperate. You say nothing. Just hug your knees and pretend you're not shaking. Historians still argue whether Anne's temper was always this fierce, or whether the court simply turned against her and rewrote her reputation in crueler ink. You lived it. You felt the shift. The difference between anger as power and anger as panic. Anne begins requesting foreign visitors, French nobles, Venetian scholars. She speaks in languages few understand. One day she insists on hearing a lute song composed by a blind Portuguese minstrel who may or may not have existed. You spend hours chasing down a piece of parchment that turns out to be a joke played by the kitchen boys. You don't laugh. Not anymore. Anne asks you to burn several letters one evening. You nod. You always nod. But before you throw them into the fire, you read one. It's addressed to her cousin. Full of cryptic lines. The fox scratches at the henhouse. The lilies bloom too early this year. Do not trust the man with the ink-stained fingers. You memorize it. You don't know why. You just do. That same week, Anne refuses to attend Mass. Says she has a cough. You know better. She sits alone by the window, muttering about Henry's last sermon. About how he spoke of loyalty while fingering Jane's sleeve under the table. The court feels poisoned. Even the air tastes bitter. Jane is in the palace more now. Always flanked by chaperones. Always demure. She smiles as if her face might crack from too much emotion. Anne calls her the silent spectre. You're not allowed to say her name. One day, Anne sees Jane drop a ribbon. She steps on it, accidentally of course, but doesn't move. Jane bends to retrieve it. Anne watches without blinking. You hold your breath for the explosion, but none comes. Instead, Anne whispers to you later, "What kind of woman smiles while stealing another's crown?" You don't answer. There's no safe reply. Anne's brother George visits more often. Their conversations are louder, more heated. You catch words like loyalty, danger, Cromwell. One night, you hear Anne sobbing, not dainty, delicate sobs, the kind that split ribs and leave the throat raw. You press your ear to the wall, heart thudding. You've never heard her cry, and you never hear her cry again. From then on, she's steel. One afternoon, she calls you close, too close. Her fingers wrap lightly around your wrist. Do you know what wolves do when cornered? You shake your head. They bite their own leg off to get free. You don't sleep that night. Court politics grow heavier. You can feel them, like dust settling over everything. Thomas Cromwell passes through the halls, silent and unsmiling. People lower their voices when he's near. You catch him looking at you once, just once. His eyes are not curious. They're calculating. Anne's allies start vanishing, quietly. One's reassigned to Calais, another to a rural estate. One simply disappears. She knows what's coming. You can tell. But she doesn't run. She sharpens. Every gesture becomes deliberate. Every smile, every nod, every prayer. When the king hosts a masquerade, she arrives dressed in black and gold. The others gasp. You just watch. The feathers in her mask tremble with every step. At supper, Henry laughs too hard at Jane's joke. Anne smiles and lifts her goblet. "To old ghosts," she says. The room falls silent. She turns to you later and whispers, "If they want a villain, I'll give them one worth remembering." And just like that, you understand, she isn't broken. She's preparing. The smell hits you before you even round the corridor. Smoke and beeswax, sharp enough to sting your nose. The chapel candles are burning too hot, and someone's knocked over a tray of frankincense. The air is thick, heavy with something ancient and unsettled. You were sent to fetch Anne's rosary, but you slow down near the corner, because that's when you hear it. "They're saying she's a witch now," whispers one courtier. "She bewitched the king," says another. How else do you explain it? You don't stop. But you do listen. The word witch has slithered back into court. It was always a shadow, of course. Anne's charm, her sharp wit, her so-called sixth finger. But now it's out loud, crawling up the walls. That night, you see her reading by candlelight. She doesn't look up as you set down her cup. "Do you believe in magic?" she asks. You hesitate. "I believe in consequences." She smiles, not kindly. Smart girl. You hear more in the days that follow. She talks to birds. She dreams in Latin. She eats saffron to curse her enemies. She keeps a cat that guards her door and hisses at priests. You know the truth. It's not even her cat. It just wandered in once and stayed because of the warm cushions. Still, the stories grow. You find a dried poppy tucked in her prayer book. No explanation. You don't ask. Anne begins to carry a small book with her everywhere, bound in leather, clasped tight. You glimpse the title once. De Occulta Philosophia. It's Latin. Occult philosophy. You don't know whether to be impressed or terrified. Maybe both. Historians still argue whether Anne practiced any form of folk magic, or if these accusations were fabricated by her enemies as a weapon of fear. But here, in this moment, as she lights a candle and mutters something under her breath, you start to wonder yourself. She sends you to fetch herbs from the apothecary. Mandrake root, wormwood, a powdered resin that smells like rot and roses. For headaches, she claims. You wrap them carefully in cloth. Tell yourself they're just medicine. That week, Anne has a nightmare. You find her in the hallway at dawn, barefoot, pale, muttering about ravens. They flew out of the fire, she says, gripping your sleeve. 3 of them, all with my face. You don't know what to say, so you guide her back to bed and sit with her until her breathing evens out. After that, she starts sleeping with a dagger under her pillow. One evening, you pass the Queen's study and hear a conversation you were absolutely not meant to overhear. Witchcraft is treason, says a voice, male, cold, familiar. Cromwell. And yet, Anne replies, calm as ice, so is cowardice. You don't catch the rest. The very next day, a new portrait of Jane Seymour is hung in the East Gallery. Anne doesn't look at it. She walks right past, but you see her jaw tighten. That night, you see her burning something in the hearth. A letter. A page from a book. You're not sure. The flames flicker green for a moment. Probably just sap, right? Still, you sleep with your rosary under your pillow after that. People begin avoiding her. Courtiers bow from farther away. Maids request reassignment. Even her monkey, had it survived this long, might have taken its chances elsewhere. You stay, maybe out of loyalty. Maybe because you want to see how it ends. Anne takes long walks now, alone, if she can manage it. She speaks to herself. To the wind. Once, you see her place her palm against the stone wall and close her eyes like she's listening to it breathe. A priest visits, uninvited. She tells him to leave. He doesn't. She lets him sit for 15 minutes, then reads him a psalm backward and thanks him for his cultural curiosity. He leaves quickly. You later hear he requested early retirement. Another morning, Anne calls you into her chamber and hands you a ring. Small, delicate, carved with a hawk in flight. Hide this, she says. If they take me, make sure it isn't on my body. You hide it behind a loose floorboard in the laundry room. It's still there. That day she wears black velvet. No jewelry, no smile. And still, they say she laughed too loudly. That she danced too freely. That her words were spells and her silence worse. You find a pamphlet under a tray of sweetmeats. Queen or sorceress. The ink is still wet. Later, you watch as Anne sets fire to it with a single candle. They want a witch, she says. Fine, let them burn one. But you see the tremble in her hand. That evening she reads your palm. You didn't ask her to. You were just pouring her tea. Long life, she murmurs, tracing your fate line. But trouble with authority, and men, possibly ducks. You laugh. She doesn't. Never marry a man who calls you clever, she says. He'll resent it. You commit that to memory. By the end of the week, someone draws a chalk sigil on her chamber door. A curse, or a joke. Hard to say. Anne doesn't react. She steps over it like dust, but later you find her kneeling in the chapel. Not praying, just sitting, silent, still, staring at the altar like it might open. You sit beside her. You don't speak, neither does she. It starts with the flowers. Fresh roses every morning, white as moonlight, arranged in a perfect circle on Anne's breakfast table. At first she thinks they're from the king. You do too. But then a note arrives, unsigned, tucked inside the folds of a linen napkin. The petals fall faster now. Anne doesn't blink. She reads it once, folds it twice, and tucks it into her sleeve like it's nothing. But you see her hand tremble when she lifts her cup. Just barely. Everything starts to decay, quietly. The kitchens begin to send burnt bread. Messages are lost in delivery. Your apron goes missing and turns up slashed in the laundry. Anne's fox fur muff is found soaked through with river water. No one knows how. Someone knocks over the vase of holy water by her door, and still no one says a word. The servants have changed. You barely recognize the faces anymore. New footmen, new maids, all polite, all quiet, all suspiciously competent. They smile too much. Anne's closest ladies have gone. One to a countryside retreat. One married off. One, you hear, simply vanished. You remain. The only one from the old days still in her inner orbit. You're not sure why. Loyalty? Invisibility? Maybe both. Anne stops singing. She used to hum while brushing her hair or reading. Now, nothing. You miss it. Even the melancholy French tunes that made you feel like you were drowning in perfume and betrayal. The silence hurts more than the shouting ever did. One afternoon, you're sent to fetch something from the cellar and find one of the guards rifling through Anne's letters. You freeze. He doesn't. Just routine, he mutters, then walks off without meeting your eyes. When you return to the Queen's chamber, she already knows. You can tell. Her back is too straight, her tea untouched. They're inside my walls, she says. You want to say I'm here, but you don't. Words don't seem to help anymore. She asks you to check under her bed. You do. Nothing but a dropped ribbon and some old rose petals that have turned brown. You collect them. She thanks you. You burn them that night. Rumors shift tone. They're not whispers anymore. They're conversations. In full voice. She was never lawful queen. She poisoned Catherine. She seduced half the court. She dances with the devil. And the most dangerous of all, she cannot bear a living son. You overhear it in the scullery, shouted in the heat of bread-slicing frustration. You throw a wet cloth at the wall. It doesn't help. Anne begins talking in riddles again. One morning she asks, if you hang a portrait upside down, does the subject feel it in the afterlife? You blink. I don't know, Your Grace. She smiles. We should test it. You both laugh, but only briefly. Her humor is intermittent now, fleeting, like sunlight slipping through storm clouds. Beautiful, but never staying long enough to warm your skin. You hear that Jane Seymour has moved into new rooms, closer to the king. Anne says nothing. She just begins sleeping with her curtains open. You find her one morning staring at the moon. Do you think the moon envies the sun? She asks. No, you say. The moon doesn't burn people. She smiles at that. Then, it might still want to. Historians still debate whether Anne sensed her fall, or if she fought all the way down, blind to the noose. But you remember the way she moved through those final weeks, not like a queen, not even like a woman, but like a ghost rehearsing her hauntings. She starts writing more. Notes, poems, instructions. Some she seals with wax. Some she burns immediately after writing. You find fragments in the grate. Names. Doodles. One that reads, "He gave me a crown made of knives. You save that one." Anne begins gifting things away. Small things. A hairpin to a maid she barely knows. A book to a page who once made her laugh. She gives you a glove. Just one. It's not magic, she says, but it's warm. You sleep with it under your pillow. You still do. The atmosphere in court is stifling, like a play where everyone knows the ending, but still acts surprised when the curtain falls. The courtiers laugh louder, bow deeper, exit faster. The rats are bolder. They dart across the halls like they know the Queen's protection no longer covers the floorboards. One day, Anne drops her ring. You reach to pick it up, but she stops you. "Leave it," she whispers. You step back. She walks away. It's still there, days later. Unclaimed. Unnoticed. Then one afternoon you pass the great hall, and hear the king laughing, not the empty chuckle he gives in court, real laughter, deep, ugly, triumphant. You peek through a tapestry. Jane is beside him, smiling politely, her hands folded, her eyes down. Anne isn't there. You return to Anne's chamber. She's sitting in her chair, hands in her lap, watching the fire. She doesn't ask you where you've been. She doesn't ask you anything. Finally, she says, "I had a dream." You wait. "I was in a garden, and every rose had teeth." You sit beside her. "I tried to leave," she continues, "but the vines kept pulling me back, not strangling, just holding." You say nothing. You walk to the tower before sunrise. You're not supposed to, obviously. Servants aren't allowed outside the palace without permission, especially not now, not with everything so fragile, so thick with dread you could smear it on toast. But you have Anne's gown, her coronation gown, the golden one, and no one else volunteered to deliver it. So, you wrap it in cloth, hug it to your chest like it's a newborn, and walk. The cobblestones are slick from dew. Your shoes squelch with each step. You keep your head down, hoping the guards don't ask questions. They don't. They barely glance your way. You're just a maid, just another shadow. The tower looms before you, all grey menace and fog-stained stone. You've never been this close before. You always imagined it as myth, where dragons are kept, where kings bury secrets. But now, it's very real. It breathes. You tell the guard your errand. He waves you through, eyes barely flicking toward the bundle in your arms. "Leave it at the Queen's chamber," he grunts, as if those words aren't dripping with irony. She has a chamber, a cell. Same difference. You step inside, and everything changes. The walls are narrow, close. The light from the slit window spills in like reluctant honey. It touches the floor, the cot, the table, and her, Anne. She's seated on a plain wooden stool, hair pulled back, hands folded, face turned toward the window. She doesn't turn when you enter. You came. You nod, then realize she can't see you. "Yes, Your Grace." You brought the gown. You lay it on the cot. It looks wrong here, like placing a crown on a corpse. She finally turns. Her eyes are rimmed with shadows but clear, brighter than they should be. "Do you think gold forgives blood?" she asks. You don't answer. You never know how. She sighs. "I wanted to wear it. Just once more. Just to remember." You help her lift it. The weight of it is shocking. It takes both of you to arrange it over her shift. She smooths the sleeves, runs her fingers down the bodice like tracing a map of everything she's lost. You step back. She stands before the tiny mirror, not as a prisoner, as a queen. For a full minute, neither of you speaks. Then she laughs. It's soft, not bitter, almost musical. "You know," she says, "they say I committed treason with half the court." You nod carefully. "I barely touched them. I barely touched anyone. But a woman who speaks too loudly must be punished, and I never did whisper well." She walks to the cot, sits. "Did they replace me yet?" You hesitate. "Not officially." She raises an eyebrow. "Jane's in your old chamber, you admit." She closes her eyes. Of course she is. The silence stretches long. The candle sputters. You hear voices outside the door, guards shifting, whispering, breathing like wolves. "I miss music," Anne says. You nod. "I miss laughter. Not polite court laughter. Real laughter. The kind that shakes your belly and makes you drop your wine." She opens her eyes and looks at you. "You made me laugh once." Your throat tightens. "I remember." She smiles. Then, "Do you believe in heaven?" You hesitate. "I don't mean golden gates and harps," she continues. "I mean something gentle, a place where your name isn't a weapon." You think of the gardens, the quiet corners, the way she used to hum while brushing her hair. Yes, you say. I do. She nods. Good. Then maybe I'll go there. You don't cry. Not yet. You want to. But something about the way she's sitting, so poised, so steady, won't let you. A knock at the door. A guard's voice. Time's up. Anne flinches. Just a little. She stands, brushes invisible dust from her sleeves. I suppose I can't keep the dress. You gently start to unlace it, hands trembling. She helps, fingers deft, efficient. Together, you peel away the gold. She's wearing white beneath, simple, soft. I always hated this color, she says. Too much like surrender. You fold the gown, tuck it back into its cloth, then you reach into your pocket. The glove, the one she gave you. You press it into her hand. She closes her fingers around it, slowly, carefully, as if memorizing its shape. Thank you, she whispers, for seeing me. Your vision blurs. You curtsy, deep from the spine, and leave the room before the tears spill. As you walk down the stone steps, you hear something faint. A voice. Singing. Anne. It's the lullaby she used to hum. The one in French. The one you never understood. She sings it now, not for court, not for kings, but for herself, and for you. You walk to the tower before sunrise. You're not supposed to, obviously. Servants aren't allowed outside the palace without permission, especially not now, not with everything so fragile, so thick with dread you could smear it on toast. But you have Anne's gown, her coronation gown, the golden one, and no one else volunteered to deliver it. So, you wrap it in cloth, hug it to your chest like it's a newborn, and walk. The cobblestones are slick from dew. Your shoes squelch with each step. You keep your head down, hoping the guards don't ask questions. They don't. They barely glance your way. You're just a maid. Just another shadow. The tower looms before you, all grey menace and fog-stained stone. You've never been this close before. You always imagined it as myth, where dragons are kept, where kings bury secrets. But now, it's very real. It breathes. You tell the guard your errand. He waves you through, eyes barely flicking toward the bundle in your arms. Leave it at the Queen's chamber, he grunts, as if those words aren't dripping with irony. She has a chamber, a cell. Same difference. You step inside, and everything changes. The walls are narrow, close. The light from the slit window spills in like reluctant honey. It touches the floor, the cot, the table, and her. Anne. She's seated on a plain wooden stool, hair pulled back, hands folded, face turned toward the window. She doesn't turn when you enter. You came. You nod, then realize she can't see you. Yes, Your Grace. You brought the gown. You lay it on the cot. It looks wrong here, like placing a crown on a corpse. She finally turns. Her eyes are rimmed with shadows but clear, brighter than they should be. Do you think gold forgives blood? She asks. You don't answer. You never know how. She sighs. I wanted to wear it, just once more, just to remember. You help her lift it. The weight of it is shocking. It takes both of you to arrange it over her shift. She smooths the sleeves, runs her fingers down the bodice like tracing a map of everything she's lost. You step back. She stands before the tiny mirror, not as a prisoner, as a queen. For a full minute, neither of you speaks. Then she laughs. It's soft, not bitter, almost musical. You know, she says, they say I committed treason with half the court. You nod carefully. I barely touched them. I barely touched anyone. But a woman who speaks too loudly must be punished, and I never did whisper well. She walks to the cot, sits. Did they replace me yet? You hesitate. Not officially. She raises an eyebrow. Jane's in your old chamber, you admit. She closes her eyes. Of course she is. The silence stretches long. The candle sputters. You hear voices outside the door, guards shifting, whispering, breathing like wolves. I miss music, Anne says. You nod. I miss laughter, not polite court laughter, real laughter. The kind that shakes your belly and makes you drop your wine. She opens her eyes and looks at you. You made me laugh once. Your throat tightens. I remember. She smiles. Then, do you believe in heaven? You hesitate. I don't mean golden gates and harps, she continues. I mean something gentle. A place where your name isn't a weapon. You think of the gardens, the quiet corners, the way she used to hum while brushing her hair. Yes, you say. I do. She nods. Good. Then maybe I'll go there. You don't cry. Not yet. You want to. But something about the way she's sitting, so poised, so steady, won't let you. A knock at the door. A guard's voice. Time's up. Anne flinches. Just a little. She stands, brushes invisible dust from her sleeves. I suppose I can't keep the dress. You gently start to unlace it, hands trembling. She helps, fingers deft, efficient. Together, you peel away the gold. She's wearing white beneath. Simple, soft. I always hated this color, she says. Too much like surrender. You fold the gown, tuck it back into its cloth. Then you reach into your pocket. The glove, the one she gave you. You press it into her hand. She closes her fingers around it, slowly, carefully, as if memorizing its shape. Thank you, she whispers, for seeing me. Your vision blurs. You curtsy, deep from the spine, and leave the room before the tears spill. As you walk down the stone steps, you hear something faint. A voice. Singing. Anne. It's the lullaby she used to hum. The one in French. The one you never understood. She sings it now, not for court, not for kings, but for herself. And for you. They choose the French method. Of course they do. A sword, not an axe. Quick, clean, merciful. You doubt it. The execution is set for Tower Green. Private, they say. For dignity. But you know the truth. It's because the people might riot, or worse, cheer. The night before, you don't sleep. No one does. The palace is silent, but it feels like holding your breath for too long. Even the birds seem to know. You're not summoned. You're not summoned. You're not supposed to be there, but somehow you are. You slip out early, before the sun breaks, feet muffled on cold stone. You walk fast, eyes down, heart pounding so hard it feels like it might split your ribs. At the tower gate, a guard hesitates. You pull out the folded scrap of parchment, the one with Anne's falcon seal, and your name scrawled beneath in her hurried hand. He lets you through. You follow the corridor you took before, past the walls that have memorized sorrow. Up the steps, through the low arch, into the square. The scaffold is already waiting. Freshly swept, draped in black. The executioner waits beside it, dressed in black too, his long sword strapped to his back. He is French. He bows often, says little. His eyes stay down. He won't meet hers. Anne arrives shortly after. She's wearing grey, a soft dove-grey gown with white fur trim. Her hood is simple, her hair tucked away. No jewelry, no crown, only grace. She walks slowly, head high, like she's walking toward a throne. You stand in the shadows, barely breathing. She mounts the steps without help, without trembling. I am come hither to die, she says, voice steady. as the law and the king's commandment do will it. The crowd is small, courtiers, priests, the nervous, the hungry, the terrified. You. She continues, the words spilling like well-rehearsed poetry. She speaks of forgiveness, of obedience. She praises Henry. You want to scream, but she speaks the words clearly, carefully, as if she's slicing her own heart open one syllable at a time. Historians still argue whether her final speech was sincere or strategic, whether she loved the king to the end, or simply knew the only power left was leaving well. You believe she spoke for survival, hers, and every woman after her. The priest gives her a blessing. The executioner asks her forgiveness. She nods. I forgive you, she says. I pray God forgives you too. Then she removes her hood. The wind catches a strand of hair and lifts it gently across her cheek. She kneels. She tucks her skirt beneath her, and she begins to pray. She places her hands out before her, not tied, not bound, open. The executioner gives the signal. A boy tiptoes toward her, places a blindfold gently across her eyes. She nods. The sword is drawn. He doesn't raise it over his head, not like the axe. He swings from the side, fast, and in one perfect, horrifying instant, it is done. She crumples. The air gasps. A bird shrieks somewhere above the tower. You don't move. You can't. Her ladies rush forward. They cover her body, wrap her gently, tenderly. One gathers the head, curls the hair behind her ear. You turn and walk away before the blood touches your shoes. Later, you help prepare the room. You scrub the floor. The smell of rose oil and iron clings to your dress. You wash your hands over and over. It doesn't leave. You find yourself in her chambers before you realize your feet carried you there. They haven't changed it yet. Not yet. Her comb is still on the table. You pick it up. Hold it tight. Tighter. You remember her brushing her hair. You remember her laughing. You remember her telling you not to marry a man who calls you clever. You slide the comb into your apron pocket. They bury her in an arrow chest. No coffin, no ceremony. Just a plain grave in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, near others who fell from grace. No inscription, no stone. Just silence. You visit it days later. You kneel. Press your fingers to the stone floor. Try to feel her. Nothing. But maybe that's how it should be. She didn't belong to the ground. She belonged to the fire. And you, well, you were only ever the witness. But somehow, that's enough. You return to the palace the same way you left it. Quietly, unnoticed, like smoke slipping back under a door. No one welcomes you. No one speaks to you. Your presence is not forbidden, but it's no longer familiar. The rooms feel colder, brighter. Someone opened all the curtains as if trying to scrub out her memory with sunlight. You walk to your quarters. Your cot has been moved. A new maid, wide-eyed, uncertain, sits on it, stitching buttons to a sleeve that isn't hers. She doesn't even look up. You don't say anything. You just keep walking. The corridors are buzzing with change. New livery, new banners. The red and white rose of the Tudors now stands without falcon wings beside it. The falcon's been erased. Scrubbed off goblets, tapestries, cushion seams. Like she never existed. You're called back to work. Of course you are. You start in the laundry. Because no matter who's queen, someone has to wash the gowns. You wring cloth. You scrub lace. You hang silks in the bitter wind. Then they bring you something you weren't prepared for. Her linens. Blood-stained. Not from childbirth. Not from illness. From death. You stand there for too long, staring. The red has already turned brown. Rust-colored. But it's unmistakable. Anne's. The sheets are wrinkled, damp, knotted at the corners. as if someone had tried to erase the event by twisting time around it. "Burn them," the steward says. "You don't. You wash them. By hand. Quietly. And you hang them to dry on the east side of the courtyard, where the wind blows hardest. You don't know why you do it. Maybe because it feels like a ritual. Maybe because it feels like respect. Or maybe because it's the only thing you can do for her now. After that, you're moved to the kitchens. Too many whispers about you being Anne's girl. You're put on poultry duty, plucking feathers, sorting giblets, boiling bones for stock. You work beside women who never met her, who roll their eyes when her name is mentioned, who call her the witch when they think no one's listening. You bite your tongue until it bleeds. You're given new quarters, smaller, colder, no window, a straw mattress that squeaks with every breath. You lie awake at night, staring into darkness, clutching the comb you never returned. Jane Seymour is crowned a few weeks later. The bells ring, the wine flows, the banners wave. You don't attend. You watch from the shadows as the new queen parades through the hall in a gown of pearl grey satin, her face as unreadable as ever. The people cheer. They always do. One morning, you catch sight of the new queen in the gardens. She's walking alone, head bent, hands clasped. You wonder what she thinks about, whether she feels the ground shifting beneath her, whether she dreams of swords, too. You start dreaming again, not of Anne, but of small things, of silver goblets, of folded letters, of white roses with hidden thorns. You begin to forget her voice. That's the part that hurts most. Historians still argue whether Anne was ambitious or innocent, a victim or a villain, a master manipulator or simply another pawn. You don't argue. You just remember. You remember the warmth of her hands, the sudden brightness of her laugh, the way she said your name only once, but made it feel like it belonged in history. You find a new rhythm. Days of chopping and boiling, nights of silence and aching feet. You say less. You listen more. You become the kind of girl people forget is standing in the room. And that's exactly how you survive. Until one day, you hear your name. From behind you. Soft, measured. You turn. A new steward. "We're short a maid in the Queen's apartments," he says. "Report at once." You hesitate. He blinks. "Is there a problem?" You shake your head. "No, sir." You walk the familiar halls again. Different paintings, different scents, different guards. But the walls haven't forgotten. And neither have you. The Queen's new chambers smell like rosewater and resignation. You step inside with practiced quiet, the tray steady in your hands, your face neutral. Jane Seymour sits by the hearth, pale fingers cradling a book she isn't reading. A maid beside her knots embroidery threads and doesn't speak. No one does. You place the tray down, curtsy, turn to leave. Wait. Jane's voice is gentle, hesitant. You stop mid-step. "Have you served before?" You nod once. "With Queen Anne." You meet her eyes, finally. They're soft, cautious, not cruel, but afraid of your answer. "Yes," you say. She nods slowly, looks down at her lap. The fire crackles. You may go. And just like that, you're back in the hall, heart racing, as if you'd dodged an arrow. But she doesn't call for you again. Not that day. Not for weeks. You move through the court like smoke, through the kitchens, the halls, the stables. Cleaning, fetching, scrubbing. Always in motion. Always forgotten. The new court is quieter, stiffer. The laughter, when it comes, is brittle. You miss the chaos. You miss the sharp edges, the danger, the sense that something mattered more than comfort. You miss her. Anne's name is not spoken anymore, not openly. You see people flinch when it slips from someone's lips. A ghost. A superstition. You walk past the chapel where she lies. No marker. Just stone. You whisper her name beneath your breath. You return to your work. One morning, you find something tucked inside your apron pocket. The ring. The one she told you to hide. The falcon still etched on its surface. You search for who left it. No one looks guilty. No one meets your gaze. You hide it in your satchel and never take it out again. That night, you dream of her. Not on the scaffold, not in the tower, in the garden. Laughing. Free. The years slip past, quietly. You leave court not with fanfare, but with a final curtsy and a letter of service that says, competent, discreet, reliable. You take a coach north, to a cottage, a quieter life. You marry a carpenter. He's kind. He smells like cedar. He calls you clever, and means it. You don't tell him everything, just pieces. You have children. You teach them not to lie, not to flatter, not to bow too low. You tell them stories, most with happy endings. But some nights, when the house is quiet and the fire's low, you take out the falcon ring and place it on your palm. You remember her. Not just the queen, but the woman. The woman who sang lullabies in French, who sharpened her wit like a blade, who wore power like a dress that never quite fit but refused to be taken off. The woman who burned too brightly, too fast, and left behind nothing but embers in other people's stories. Except yours. You remember her. Because you were there. Because you're still here. Because someone has to. Now, the storm has passed. The halls of the palace grow still in your memory, the cries and clatter fading into something quieter, slower. The gowns, the swords, the secrets drift further away with every breath. You are no longer a maid in the chambers of Anne Boleyn. You are older now, wiser. The ghosts walk softer. You have learned to live with silence. The ring is still with you. Her ring. A little falcon frozen in flight. You keep it close not out of fear or duty, but out of love, or something close to it. Outside your window, a breeze stirs the trees. You can almost imagine her voice in it, not pleading, not angry, just singing, softly. And so, you close your eyes. Let the noise of court, the clang of gossip and gold, dissolve into night. Let Anne fade into the folds of history where she waits, quietly, for those who remember. You exhale. The stars above do not judge queens, or maids, or kings. They only shine, and somewhere, in that soft silver light, the falcon flies still. So rest now. You've walked far. You've seen too much. You've felt more than anyone should in a single life. But the journey is over. And the quiet is not emptiness. It is peace. It is memory. It is the closing of a story. Good night. End of script. Sweet dreams.